Good evening, everyone. I'm Ian Elliott. I'm the owner, and I'm actually at a different Drummer Books in Burlington, Ontario. And I'd like to begin by noting that the point of origin for this and for all the meetings we're involved in is the traditional territory, including the Dish with One Spoon territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Iroquois, Ojibwe, and Haudenosaunee nations. This is an acknowledgement only. We offer this very humbly as a reminder of the understanding and recognition we seek to achieve as we honor all First Peoples. Thank you for joining us for tonight's session of HarperCollins Canada's IndieBookFest. I'm here at one of those indies, Different Drummer Books in Burlington, Ontario. We are a bookstore fiercely proud of our independence and our 50 years and counting in business. I salute the wonderful independent bookshops across the country participating tonight. And if I might presume to say so, I think an important driver of our success as booksellers is the great publishing program of HarperCollins Canada and the wonderful support we've received from the great people there. I want to shout out right now to three people there, Emily Rothwell, Lauren Morocco, and Alice Tibbetts. And Alice, in particular, arranged tonight's event, extended to me the great honor of introducing our marvelous guest. And she is just off screen there, making sure all goes smoothly in her expert manner. She's so knowledgeable and kind. Thank you so much, Alice. And the authors, the folks at HarperCollins connect us with, my goodness, if as Alice is suggesting in the chat, you tune into HarperPresents.ca, you'll see what I mean. Speaking of those great authors that we get to meet, our illustrious friend Hannah Mary McKinnon. She is a great inspiration to us. She has moved from a highly accomplished career in industrial and information technology to writerly pursuits, and she revealed right away that she was a marvelous storyteller and a brilliant creator of thrillers. She has long been a wonderful erudite presence in our bookshop and at our literary events. In fact, we have proudly hosted launches of her terrific novels. These are always hectic affairs with as many excited people as our humble bookshop can hold. And her great international triumph with The Neighbors, Her Secret Son, and Sister Dear have been no surprise here. So we're so happy to celebrate with Hannah tonight in new success, the arrival of her riveting new novel, dealing irresistibly in dark machinations, trauma, and the danger-ridden path to piecing together a troubled past. You Will Remember Me. Joining Hannah in conversation tonight is the great Andrew Piper, scholar, creative writing instructor, and formidable author too. His stories and novels published over the last 15 years brought him great success, acclaim, and awards too. He's a world-renowned literary figure known via book bestseller and annual best books lists and on the shelves of our bookstores. His command of horror, the occult, and suspense have marked his works, including The Damned, The Demonologist, The Homecoming, and most recently, The Residents. These are there along with the human understanding and storytelling art that are at the heart of all great fiction. So just before we begin, we invite you to be a part of the discussion by posing your questions in text with the chat function Zoom offers. We do ask that you treat the presenter's work with respect and that your questions refrain from any harassment of any sort. HarperCollins strives to provide an environment that is welcoming and inclusive for both panelists and attendees. So for our conversation, we won't forget a meeting of phenomenal literary voices and minds. We are grateful to encounter this evening Andrew Piper, Hannah Mary McKinnon, and You Will Remember Me. Thank you.
Hello, thanks, Ian. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Andrew. Good to see you.
Likewise, and congratulations on this book. As I was just sort of saying before we started tonight, but I'm happy to say it again for all to hear that I love this book, and it's so twisty, and there's so many opportunities to think that you figured it out. And in my case, anyway, I was consistently wrong. So
that pleases me immensely. Thank you.
Yes, I was wrong the whole way. So I wanted to start, and I'm sure you would agree with me, this is the toughest question to answer, and I'll ask it first, which is, can you give us just a short description of the book? I mean, how would you pitch it to one of Ian's clients?
I would say it's an amnesia thriller that features three main characters. We'll call the first one the man from the beach, who wakes up on a beach, doesn't know where he is, how he got there, or who he is. It features a woman called Lily, who is searching for her boyfriend, Jack, who went missing after an evening swim. And the third character is Maya, who's also searching for someone, but she's searching for her estranged stepbrother, Ash, who upped and left and disappeared from town 2 years ago, and she hasn't heard from him since. But the question is the man from the beach Jack, Ash, neither, or both?
Brilliantly done. I would have.
I've practiced.
Yeah, I can tell, but seamlessly so. Wonderfully done. Okay, so this is a book that, and my job in asking you questions, I have to be very alert to avoid spoilers of any kind, because there are so many opportunities to destroy the wonderful structure of the story that you've made. So I will be very careful in not doing that. But I wanted to, because as you mentioned, the man on the beach is someone who we meet at the very beginning of the story, and he does not know who he is. Certainly he presents to the reader as someone who is now on a journey to discover who he is. And so from a writerly point of view, I was curious to know whether you sort of structured the novel and that character, the man on the beach in particular, in terms of playing out or sort of breadcrumb trailing the things that he would learn about himself and when, sort of through the whole book, and you knew that all in advance, or did you kind of, to a degree, join him on that journey of self-discovery and thus create the story through that sort of self-creation?
That's a great question. And I would say it's probably a little bit of both. So I'm a very heavy plotter. I plot quite extensively, although that didn't help me necessarily that much with this book in certain ways. So I knew certain things that he would discover, certain things that he would learn. The timing was maybe a little bit up in the air at the beginning, but it was really through writing the book, writing my first skeleton draft, dear Lord, not the one I would ever give to my editor, not the first draft, not her first draft, my first draft, and trying to figure the story out. And actually the amnesia side was the most difficult, because I had not anticipated, as I plotted it, like I did all my other books, that when I came to write the chapters for the man from the beach, I couldn't give him a memory or a flashback or a history. I knew what his history was, but he wasn't allowed to know. And that really threw me for a loop. It was tricky. So I'd have to say the short answer is a little bit of both.
And that challenge, it seems, would, in a different way, but also extend to the other two main characters that you've already mentioned, Maya and Lily. Lily, who believes herself to be searching for Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Maya, who we understand is the stepsister to Ash. And so without saying to what extent either of those people are correct in their search, and then of course there's the man on the beach, Jack/Ash, who doesn't know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all absences in a way. And so this is a related question, but when you have characters who, at least initially, are in search of an absence, in search of a man who may or may not be who they believe that person to be, and in turn present themselves to the reader as perhaps not entirely who they present themselves to the world as. How did you, so in a way you're sort of writing around absences and then filling them in. So there's the challenge of the plot. But there's also, I think, that must be the challenge of the character. How do we get to know someone who may not be who they present themselves to be? So I was curious to know how you go about writing characters in that way, and at the same time make them, sympathetic and believable as you have done.
I think that the use of first person is definitely instrumental for me. I used to not particularly enjoy, a couple of decades ago, I didn't enjoy stories told in first person. I don't know why, but certainly I love them now. And writing them, I can really get into their into their thoughts and their minds, and they know what they're thinking, but they're not necessarily revealing all of that to anybody else. So it was a tricky process going through, okay, who thinks what, who wants what, and who is doing what to whom, and when is it all going to come together and explode? So I actually, and I did this for my previous novel as well, I wrote the list of things. So for Maya, for example, everything she knew and everything she wanted, things she didn't know, and kept that had a list for all three characters, and then cross-reference them a bit nerdy that. Just not, I mean, just on a notepad or something, just so I could still also not have a reveal on page, I don't know, 237 that I'd already revealed on 199. So, and that's also part of the editing process when you're reading it through and you think, hang on a minute, I already said that, and then go back and chop and change. So it was a bit of a delicate balance, to be honest, particularly because there are 3 point of view characters and then the one with amnesia, and all of them are lying.
Right. Yes. And I love them because they were so unreliable. I love a good unreliable liar. Not being one myself, but I was curious to know your position, not so much position, but your view on what can sometimes be presented in publishing and criticism and as a kind of orthodox position, namely, characters and likability, the likable character question. And I'm curious to know whether, you as both a writer and perhaps as a reader, is that important to you, A, and B, if it is, in what way do you sort of go about trying to create a sympathetic or likable character? Or is it sort of like, look, that's a bunch of nonsense, and that whole pressure to create likable characters is contrary to the fictional project, or what it ought to be?
It's an interesting discussion, honestly, because I've heard that a lot, and at conferences we've had, let's have an unlikable female. It seems to skew more female. How do we write unlikable female characters but still make them likable? And I love unlikable characters. I really do. I remember reading Best Day Ever by Kara Ruda and just laughing out loud because the protagonist, I guess the antagonist, Paul, was so horrible, but you knew he was going to get his comeuppance, and that was just so delicious, but it happened. So for me, the unlikability isn't a problem, neither as a reader nor as an author. I am conscious of it, I suppose, when I write, because I know that people can be put off reading a book if somebody is just horrible. So nobody is horrible all the time. So I think you have to balance the likability and unlikability to show them in a different setting. A bit like Save the Cat, Save the Cat.
Yeah.
Have a moment at the beginning where the guy saves the cat and that way he's likable. I think it's more a question of, for me, making the characters understood. So if I have an unlikable character that I've created, I work very hard to work on their backstory. I interview the characters, I build them so that when I write chapter 1, I know how they became who they are before the story starts. That's really important to me. Why are they unlikable? If they're deemed unlikable, why is that? How can that be justified? Because if someone's reading a story and they go, oh, she's this way because X, Y, Z happened, they're far more likely to go along for the ride. Another thing you can do is make somebody else even more unlikable so that the unlikable one is actually likable.
Right. It's a circle. Eventually, likability is generated from unlikability. Right.
And I mean, I write crime fiction. And in any fiction, if all of the characters were likable, it would be an episode of Strawberry Shortcake.
Right.
Maybe there are even unlikable characters in Strawberry Shortcake. Maybe there's a baddie in Strawberry Shortcake, probably. But where do you get the tension from? if everybody's happy and likable, and it doesn't work. Someone's got to be the bad guy or woman. So I love unlikable characters. That's not a problem for me at all.
I'm with you on that. Now, speaking of characters and building characters, I just wanted to like jump out of my, talking about technique for a moment, and if you would sort of let us know how, because I find it fascinating. You came to the professional writing life after having had a very successful career in a completely unrelated field, and then having this, having a genuine and very successful about face. So I think I'd be curious to know, that narrative, how your Hannah's character became to be Hannah the novelist.
I always say my writing career was born from failure. So when we moved to Canada, my husband's Canadian. When we met, he moved to Switzerland. We had our 3 sons. He was a stay-at-home dad. I was the career person, ended up as CEO of an IT company. And then we decided for a better work-life balance to move to Canada. And I started up my own business here, and it failed quite spectacularly. I mean, if I'm going to do something, I might as well do it properly, and it failed. And that was professionally very difficult. Well, actually, on every level, it was really difficult because I'd never failed professionally at anything. My career had always moved forward and always in an upward trajectory. So all of a sudden, this company not working, I had no plan B because I hadn't even really considered the prospect that it might not work. And I found myself at a crossroads, moping around, thinking, well, if I'm going to go back corporate and have no work-life balance, we might as well move back to Switzerland, because at least we have friends and family there. Because where we are now, we didn't know anyone and had no family around. And my husband, who didn't want to move back, he said, well, if you could do anything at all, what would it be? And after moping around some more, I half-heartedly said, I think I'd like to try writing a book. Not a short story or something small, where normal people start. No, I decided I would start with a novel. And he said, well, if you're going to try and do it now, because you have the opportunity. Try it and just see what happens. And I actually remember saying to him, I don't know if I should, because I think it's a pipe dream. It's everybody wants to write a book, and very few people manage to do so, or have one published at least. And also I was petrified of failing again. Absolutely petrified that this new project would fail. And Rob's always the voice of reason, give it a go, give it a try, you never know what'll happen. And so I did, and I became very, my mum would have called me pig-headed, stubborn maybe, or ambitious, whatever you want to call it. And I just decided, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to get an agent, and I'm going to get a book deal. Come hell or high water, I am going to do it. And I went to battle for my characters. And here we are.
Well, I think we can all raise a mental glass to Rob. What?
Patience of a saint, that man, let me tell you.
Was it, when you made that decision, to give it a go, was there a sense of or an inclination already in place in your aesthetic inclination to a particular genre, or genre fiction, or suspense? Because I know, so your earlier books it's not always sort of in the same exact sort of subgenre space.
That's right.
So did you sort of consider that part, or was it just that was the story that came out first?
It was that. So I'd read a lot of rom-coms. I used to read thrillers all the time as a teen, up to about my mid-20s. And then after a personal tragedy, I couldn't touch thrillers for the longest time. And when I had the inspiration for my first book, which was Time After Time, it's about we'll call it Groundhog Day meets Sliding Doors, those two movies. It's a combination of those. So a woman who's in her early 40s, who may or may not have some curly brown hair, and who's thinking about the choices she's made. She's in a bit of a bind professionally and at home, and she wonders how her life might have turned out had she not met her husband, but had she married her first boyfriend. And then she wakes up the next morning and is married to him, and she's the only one who realizes that this is not right. She has a husband and kids, and what is going on? So she's getting a glimpse of what happened, of what might have happened. So that one was just because the idea struck me, and it seemed like a good one, a relatively commercial one, even though I had really no idea. But looking back, I suppose, and I thought, well, I'm just gonna try. So I wrote that one, and as it was out on submission a couple of years later, or even before, I think, before I'd found the agent, I'd started writing what became The Neighbours. And that one already at the beginning felt darker. It felt just, the characters are more messed up and grittier, and not everything would work out for everyone. And it was not a rom-com. But I couldn't really put a name on what it was because I wasn't overly familiar with all of the genres and the sub-genres. All I could say was it felt different and it was interesting, and I wanted to write that story. So when Time After Time published in the UK, it was Avon under HarperCollins UK, they published it as an ebook first. The strategy being, if it does really well in ebook, we'll bring out a printed copy, which has not happened. So that tells you everything you need to know about how well it did. But HarperCollins North America, so Mira, were kind enough to pick up The Neighbours. And it didn't bother them that I had a debut that was a rom-com because it was ebook and it was in the UK and it hadn't really done that well. So they launched me, really, The Neighbours as my debut, because it was my debut thriller, or well, suspense, domestic suspense. And with each book, I've got a little bit darker and darker and more thriller-esque. And that's really the space that I'm really happy to be in.
So along that process, we now have book number 5, You Will Remember Me, the book we're talking about tonight. And it is thorny, as we've already mentioned. It's thorny with secrets and very, the floor is constantly kind of dropping out from under the reader in wonderful ways to new and ever newer revelations. And so we love this. We love this kind of storytelling, and we always have. But it feels like the moment is so right for secrets and stories about secrets. And I was curious to know if you had any theories about why we love to read stories like yours and to move into a space that is so deeply unreliable and full of deception.
I wonder if it's because humans are genuinely curious. We want to know stuff. I mean, look at the massive boom in reality TV shows and all the stuff that's going on there. And also, I think maybe, is it partially to do with social media, where we have so much access into people's lives that we never had before? Celebrities or non-celebrities, it doesn't really matter. People posting stuff, sharing things on Facebook, whether it's I don't know, the death of a parent or an experience they've had or something. There's an abundance of those of sharing those kinds of stories. But I think, honestly, it's probably because as human beings, we're curious. We want to know. Someone says, well, can I tell you something? Most of us will go, yeah. What is it? And I have to say, I am a Volt. When someone says, can I tell you something, but you can't tell anyone, I tell no one. I am a Volt. This is where secrets come to die, But it's true. We are. I don't know. What do you think it is? What do you think is curious?
I'm not sure I have the answer. I know I don't have the answer, but a theory that occurred to me today is that these stories so frequently, as yours does, also works within, and they work best within a space where the secrets are traded between lovers or within marriages, or families sometimes. And the intimacy of those relationships, particularly if they are sexual or romantic, I wonder if in the last several years, as our dating and mating techniques and rituals have moved online more and more, and where a space where our presentations of self are dubious at best. We kind of only present our best selves on Instagram, and we kind of seek to make other people jealous through living these perfect but largely false lives. And so it's almost like built into the cake of social media, a sort of a degree of falsehood and false presentation.
Interestingly, I met Rob online. So we met online way back in the dark ages in 1999. So this is the first night that the internet was installed at my house. So we're going way back. Dial-up modems, remember those with that awful noise, where you could either be on the phone or online. You had to choose. You couldn't have both.
No.
And only one computer at a time, if I remember rightly. And we met completely by accident. He was in Canada, I was in Switzerland. We met on ICQ, which has, I believe died as well. I don't think that's around anymore. And when we first met, there were no pictures. It wasn't even a dating site. It was just a chat site. And we met completely by accident. And we were the only thing I lied about was my weight. I told him I was about 15 pounds lighter and then went on a diet. So when we met, I was actually the weight I was. That's the only thing. But I think because the distance, we didn't think we were going to really meet, at least not for the first week or so. And then it became very obvious that we would. But there wasn't that layer of complexity. There was no social media of sharing photographs where everything's perfect, but behind the camera, everything's in complete disarray. There wasn't that side. So it's really, having met online accidentally and seen that shift, that's a really interesting theory. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a much more innocent time.
Yes.
Where maybe probably didn't occur to you beyond the innocent fib of a detail.
Lighter. He said he was heavier, which is hilarious. Oh. I know. It's ridiculous.
I like Rob more and more the more I hear about it.
He's a good guy.
You will remember me is if I'm correct in reading it. I remember reading a previous interview, which you talked about the book, is derived from, at least in part, or inspired by a real event that you encountered. And so I'd love to know a little bit more about what that event was. And then secondly, second part of the question, is that typical for you that you kind of scour the back pages of the newspaper or online looking for that sort of thing? Or is that just unique to this book?
So it was the case of a gentleman from Toronto in, I think it was 2018. He went on a skiing trip to Lake Placid with his family and disappeared, just vanished off the face of the mountain. And of course, everyone was searching for him, very worried that he had fallen, maybe was hurt, or indeed had perished or would on the mountain. And days went by and they couldn't find him, they couldn't locate him anywhere. And he showed up in Sacramento on the other side of the country, wearing his ski gear with a credit card in his pocket and no memory. And I remember hearing that and thinking, that must have been terrifying, first of all. People weren't really helping him. I don't think. He tried to get a phone and people said, well, you don't have any ID. Who are you? He didn't know. And eventually he was able to call his wife, and they were reunited, and he was brought home and things worked out. And they think he must have fallen or suffered some kind of head trauma and had retrograde amnesia, so he could not remember his past or only slivers of filaments, like the man from the beach, essentially. And I just thought, A, that's terrifying. B, I'm glad everything worked out for the gentleman in question. But what could have gone wrong? Because when you don't know who you are, you have to believe, well, you don't have to, but you're left to believe everything people are telling you about themselves, about you. But what if they don't have your best interests at heart? how would you even know? Because you don't know yourself, you don't know these people, so you have no idea if they're lying, what's true, what isn't, what's partially true. And I found that really, really fascinating. So that was the beginning of the story. As to whether that's typical, I don't scour the newspapers or magazines as much as I hear something that really piques my interest. So, for example, Sister Dear, last year's book, that was a CBC radio segment where a woman was searching for the owner of a wedding ring she'd found at a playground. And she was searching through Twitter. Very innocent, very lovely, a very heartwarming story. You know, I found this ring, looking for the owner, and CBC Radio picked it up. But my thriller brain kicked in and went, oh, what if she finds the owner and they have a much better life and she gets jealous and she starts stalking them? That's not exactly the Sister Dear story. There's a pivotal scene with a ring, though, that gets stolen. So that's where that came from. And the book the year before was Her Secret Son, something something I watched on the news. I won't say what it is because it'll give too much away. But I remember thinking, wow, that would make a really cool story, especially if I tell it from another person's point of view. So that's often where stories come from, is something I hear or see. That's probably where most of my ideas have come from.
So now with book number 5, and sort of going back to, we've talked about that origin point of naively, boldly writing the first book and sort of, let's see where this goes. There's now a career that you are in the middle of, a body of work, all these very important sounding phrases to describe having 5 novels to your credit. Have you found that you think, or find yourself thinking more in terms of a career, in terms of the body of work, looking back and surveying what you've done? No, I don't want to do that again, or it's time to try something else, or this seemed to work. Can I try to, those kind of thoughts? Or do you, to the extent possible, try to kind of push those thoughts back and retain a degree of innocence each time out?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I think in terms of craft, I will look at what has worked in terms of my plotting, or in terms of anything really. What has worked, what wasn't so good, what can I change, what are all the good bits that have worked that I can put together and have a slightly different approach. But I think whenever I start on a new project, it's a new project. It's fresh and new and different, and I'm always excited about it. I'm always there's a little bit of trepidation still going on. Can I do this again? Is it going to work out? I know I'm going to go through the phases of love, hate, and want to set it all on fire. That's completely normal. So the only thing I would say is that I won't do again, probably, brackets, ask me in another 5 years maybe, and we'll see, is a character with amnesia. A point of view character with amnesia. As far as I'm concerned, that is author achievement unlocked. It was really hard and I'm not doing it again.
Fair enough. Well, you've done it well here, so why bother? It's very popular for writers on social media. Perhaps when we get together in person again, we'll say it in person. But to sort of to claim, look, and to advise each other, don't submit to the temptation to read your own reviews. Because so much of criticism has been downloaded from weekend newspapers to people on Goodreads and sites of that kind. On the one hand, there's this bounty of feedback. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it's hard to know if that is worthwhile, or if it's on the negative side, if it's demoralizing, but some people seem to find good use from that, and other people are completely destroyed by it. So do you have a policy in relation to the sort of reader response? And to the extent that you do, allow yourself to indulge in it, do you do it just because, look, I can't resist, or do you find good therapy from it?
So I have thick skin. You know, I worked in corporate for decades, so I have very thick skin, and I also know that if somebody writes a bad review of one of my books, it's not personal. It's not about me. It's about the story. They didn't connect with it. They didn't like the characters. And also, I think I always remind myself that anyone who reads my book brings their own past to and their experiences to that book. So they will experience it differently than somebody else. So I used to read all of my reviews, every single one, from 1 to 5 stars, and all the trade reviews. I thought for Sister Dear I would change tack. And I honestly, when I would see and please, everyone who's watching at home, don't go and give me a 1-star review to make me have one. But I was always relieved when the first 1-star came in, because I know it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Someone's going to give me a 1-star review. And so for The Neighbours, when that happened the first time, I thought, oh, well, that's not so bad. That didn't hurt as much as I thought it might. And I think that's why I used to read all of the reviews. But now as of Sister Dear, I decided, you know what? I'm going to experiment and only read the 4 and 5-star reviews, because people don't have to like my books, but I don't have to read that they don't like my books. So I know the reviews are there, the mediocre ones, the bad ones, but I don't actually go looking for them. I love interacting with readers online. I love being on Instagram, and the creativity of Bookstagram always blows me away. And I love people tagging me on good reviews and thanking them for that, because they take the time to get the book, library or purchase or friend or whatever, read it, review it, stage a photograph or whatever, and I think that's really lovely, and I love that. But I'm going to limit it to the 4 and 5 stars for now, because I find that's good for me. And sometimes when I'm having a bad writing day, I'll go and look at the 4 and 5-star reviews to remind myself that people like my stuff, and I just need to, push through this bad writing day and just get my bum in the chair and get on with it. So that's my stand. But I know there are some writers who don't read any of their reviews. There is a very bad trade review of You Will Remember Me. They didn't like Sister Dear. I don't know if they reviewed Her Secret Son, and they didn't like The Neighbours either. They haven't liked any of my books. And I decided I'm not going to read their review, and I feel strangely powerful.
Oh no, that's a good call. So maybe 2 quick questions before we open things up to the Q&A for everyone else. To what extent is it important for you now? Again, sort of, this has become, you're writing a book a year. You've professionalized and been celebrated for what you're doing. To what extent is it important to do that and conduct that within a sense of, right now, all we have is a sense of it, of course, because we're all in our own rooms, but to do that in a space of a community of writers, a sense of collegiality, or, is it sort of, well, look, that's a fine side effect, but it's something you don't need. And when we kind of think forward to being past the pandemic, to what extent are you really hungry for that actual kind of convention meeting in person, or you're the sort of person that, to be honest, you don't really need that pressing of flesh?
I love the community, and it's when I not with Time After Time, but certainly with The Neighbours and all of my subsequent books, that was the biggest surprise for me, was the writing community. In particular, the support from other authors. I had no idea how supportive this community is. And coming from IT recruitment, which can be pretty cutthroat at the best of times, it really took me by surprise. It really, really did. I remember asking Kimberly Bell and Mary Kubica approaching them. I'd already stalked them on Facebook, and we were friends on Facebook, and I approached them and asked them if they would blurb my book, please, pretty please. And they said yes. And I thought, wow, that's wow. And then I went to BoucherCon, the Murder Mystery Writers Convention, which is Readers Writers Convention, which happened to be in Toronto in 2017. Met them there. They introduced me to so many other people. And then you just become part of the community. And afterwards, I remember asking probably a dozen people if they wanted an advanced reader copy of The Neighbours, about a dozen authors. They all said yes, and without being asked, they all sent me a blurb, every single one. And I couldn't believe it. And the amount of enthusiasm and the lack of competition that I've experienced, because if somebody likes You Will Remember Me, doesn't mean they're not going to not buy or read or borrow or whatever a Kimberly Bell or a Mary Kubica book or whomever. So that was something that was completely unexpected, and it's wonderful. And I cannot wait to get back to the conferences. It won't be this year, it will be next year for me. And also in-person events. I love the online events, and I hope, my plan certainly is to continue with online events, because geography is an issue. Mobility is an issue. My mum was disabled and she wouldn't ever have been able to go out to an event like this. So being online, I think, offers tremendous opportunities for authors and viewers alike. So I will certainly continue with the online ones. But I love, there's nothing better than you know, being at a conference and seeing your friends, because it's almost like summer camp for authors when you go to BoucherCon. It's so fun, and meeting readers and being on panels, and I love that part. It's a huge part for me, and I feel very connected to the community. And with my project First Chapter Fun, where Hank, Philippi, Ryan and I, we read the first chapter of a different book twice a week, not ours, other people's. That's part of giving back to the community that has been so generous since I was plucked out of the slush pile, essentially.
That's lovely. Well, on that, I'm choked up a little. I couldn't agree more. So, but let's open things up. If I click on the Q&A here, let's see if there's we have some questions from the floor, the virtual floor. I suppose I'll read. Hi, Hannah. Did you use any ideas that were cut or didn't end up in previous books but worked well for this one?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I didn't. I did cut something out of You Will Remember Me. I had a secondary, or even not even a secondary character. I had this shopkeeper who I really liked. I can't remember his name. We'll call him Jim for sake of argument. And Maya goes into the shop and she says, "Hey, Jim, how are you doing?" And he says, and he's older and, you know, a bit hunched over and weathered. And he says, she says, "How are you doing?" And he says, "You know me, I'm still giving the Grim Reaper the finger." And that line just cracked me up. But we introduced Maya later, so that chapter fell away. But I'm going to keep that one and put him in another book.
Okay, at least the line. Keep the line. Yeah. Hannah, you talked about how much you like writing crime fiction, and I know your first novel was actually more on the romantic side. Is there any other genre you'd like to try your hand at?
I do have a middle grade book that I should write up to YA. I should. I mean, I could. I haven't yet. But I'm really happy doing what I'm doing now. And with a book a year, it's, as you know, it's a fair old clip. So I don't think anytime soon that I'll be moving genres. I still have plenty to explore in this one first.
This one is from Allison Hurd. You started plotting book 7 today. Yippee. How long will it take you to get your first draft ready to send to Emily?
Ooh, if all goes well, it will be around early February-ish, if all goes well. But
Right.
let's pretend everything goes well and say, yeah, no problem, beginning of February.
All right. Well, we've all heard that now, so it's set.
Oh no.
If you made an Andrew Piper / Hannah Mary McKinnon collaborative thriller, what would the topic be?
Oh gosh, well we need some ghosts in there, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there someone haunted by their past, but in a different way?
Secrets and Ghosts, not a bad working title. Yeah, I mean, and I agree with you. I think the constraints would have to be no amnesiacs.
Yes, agreed.
But we can have lots of secrets. Sex, why not?
Sure.
I think Sexy Secret Ghosts. That's the
That's the title. Might be a different genre after all.
I love it. Have you ever taken a real life unsolved murder as a basis of a novel? Is the murderer apprehended?
I have not. I have never used a real life case. No. I think that might freak me out. What if the murderer reads it and then comes after me?
Yeah, no one wants that.
No.
Here's a good practical question, a writerly question. How do you push through when you have writer's block?
So I plot. So in theory, I might have plot block where I can't figure out what comes in the plot. That could be very real. Or when I'm writing and I'm thinking, oh no, I plotted A and it's not working. It's really not, but I don't know what to do now. I will look at the plot and think, well, this element, that's still going to stay. So I'm going to write that, and then I'll leave the bit that I'm stuck on for later and I'll figure it out. So I'm still writing, but I just skip the bit that I don't know and move ahead. Because nobody said a book needs to be written in the order that it's read in.
No, precisely. Yeah. So you sort of, it's not sort of pushing the same giant boulder up the same hill.
Yep.
Do something else. Yep. Right.
Yep.
What do your sons think of their mother being an author?
Okay, so about this time last year, Sister Dear made the bestseller list, and Woo! I saw it online. Yeah, I was really pleased. I saw it online, and I went out into the hallway and said, guys, because they're all doing online school. Guys, Sister Dear hit the bestseller list, and one of them, who shall go unnamed, said, "That's great, Mom. What's for lunch?"
Yeah.
So I think they're proud, but they're too cool to say so. But no, they often ask how it's going, and a couple of them have read the books. One of them hasn't yet, because it's a bit weird. Because there are some sex scenes in mine. They're very tasteful, but there are some, and it's a bit weird to read that if your mom's written it.
Yeah. Yep. But there'll come a point where that won't be so weird. Right. I think. What are you both reading these days? Any recommendations?
Ooh, yes. So I read over the weekend. I had the pleasure of reading this one.
Ooh.
That
looks familiar.
He's a nice guy. If you met him, he's really, really lovely.
Oh, I've heard he's a jerk.
No. This one had me gripped. It was just wow. I don't, forgive me, I'm not massively well versed in American history. So that when I went and looked and realized that Franklin Pierce was indeed the president, and it was based on a real person, that just blew me away. We'll have to have a chat about how you did that one. So yeah. That's what I'm recommending today, boys and girls.
Well, lovely. Okay, well, I think that's very well chosen. I will do the same. And the truth is this on camera?
Almost like we planned it. We didn't.
I would like to ask the author of this some questions. This is genuinely, though, a terrific thriller. And if there's stories and the subgenre of, I don't even know what you'd call it. I mean, domestic thriller to me is increasingly kind of a wobbly term. It doesn't sort of fit all the things we sort of ask it to fit. So I don't know, but to me it's classic suspense writing in the sort of the Patricia Highsmith kind of space, that people are not what they seem, and there's always at least one character who is working on strictly kind of their own diabolical, rule book.
Yes.
Which is wonderful. And so I think, yes, I think it's safe. I think the safest recommendation is to recommend each other. Do we have any more questions here? Let's go down. Oh, yes. Any advice for aspiring authors?
Yes. So I wish I had, from experience, I wish I had taken creative writing courses earlier and asked for and received feedback on my own stuff, but also being able to look at other people's in a writing group, reading their manuscripts and seeing, oh, this is really great, and figure out why I like it so much, or what I'm doing that they're doing that perhaps we shouldn't be doing. That was really helpful. Otherwise, I think figuring out what works for you. So some people plot before they write the book, like I do. Some people plot while they're writing the book. So the pantsers, but they're not really pantsers because they're plotting on the page as the story unfolds. So I trying to figure out what works for you, because the same mechanisms won't work for every person. It's not one size fits all. And the third thing, well, I mentioned the skipping ahead. If you get stuck, just skip that scene and go and write the end if you know what the end is, because you can always change it later. And listening to audiobooks I found has been really, really helpful, including my own. Do you listen to your own? Do you listen to them?
I haven't, but that sounds like advice that's akin to something that I do, which is read aloud the manuscript.
Same.
Do you find that you discover often mistakes that you could read the thing on the screen or on the page 15 times?
Absolutely.
But you read it aloud and it becomes apparent.
Yes, and same with dialogue. You think, oh, hang on a minute, that sounds clunky, or yeah. Absolutely. I remember listening to, it was The Neighbours, and I listened to it, and because for me, when I listen to the narrators, it becomes their work. Sure, they're my words, but it's their interpretation of. And I'm listening to You Will Remember Me right now, and the three narrators they're just phenomenal. They're incredible, and they work so well together. But with The Neighbours, my characters had a lot of phlegm because they kept clearing their throats. And I remember listening to it thinking, if another character says, I cleared my throat one more time, I'm going to scream. So I never write that anymore. I might write it once in an entire book, but I have a whole list. Do you have a list of words that you overuse that you then do a search?
Yes.
Yeah, same. And clearing one's throat is on the hit list for me. That's not allowed.
No, and it changes, I find, from book to book. It's like, why this phrase or this word? Who knows? But it's all of them out except one.
Yes, same.
Here's another one. When did you first allow other people to read your writing without worrying about their judgment?
Oh, good Lord, I always worry. I still do. That hasn't changed. When I sent in book 6, so that's the one for 2022, to my brilliant editor and my brilliant agent, Emily and Carolyn, it was late January, I felt far more comfortable with the manuscript than I did with You Will Remember Me. But I still worried that they might not like it as much as I did, or it wasn't what they'd expected, or so I still do I worry less? I don't know. I'd have to ask Rob. Probably not. Do you find you worry less now?
No, I worry as much, but the worry is mutated from will they like it into something kind of more cosmic or something. It's almost like I don't know how we decide what is good or not. Who even knows?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I remember watching Johnny Geller, who's the CEO of Curtis Brown, the agency in the UK, and he did a TED talk about what makes a bestseller, and the essence of it was nobody knows.
Oh, yeah.
if we knew, all of our books would be bestsellers, guys.
That's right.
Yeah, something catches on and it goes. So yeah, that's a really good question. What we don't really know, do we?
We don't know.
Mhm.
One quick last one before we sort of tie things up for the evening. Which character of yours would you be most afraid to meet?
Oh, well, I'm going to give stuff away. Okay, oh no, I'm really going to give stuff away.
You may not be able to answer this.
One of my characters from next year's book, whose name is Bobby. He's from Manchester. He's a self-styled Mancunian mafioso, and I would run.
Run from Bobby. Always good advice. Hannah, thank you so much. Our time, I think, is up. But thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you. This has been such a fabulous chat. Thank you very much, Andrew.
I know. Good night. Good night, and thank you all for coming.
Everyone. Good
cheers.
night.